gentlemen, on this Wednesday, welcome to Ask the Theologian. Glad you are here today. It's Wednesday, and we're back to the Gospel of Mark today, verse by verse, rightly divided. I think we're in chapter 8. I'll double check that before tonight, get us in the right place, and would love to have you about, 10 minutes after 6 or so. And that's Mountain Time. It's always a little iffy on the Wednesday night time because we have fellowship supper here. It depends on how long the fellowship is. But, we've got hamburgers tonight. Come join us for a hamburger, if you'd like, and we'll be blessed by that. And go with it. Okay, let's see, what have you got? We have, if you're watching live, you've got a question. Put the word question in front of it. If you're watching on the archives, or you just want the always safe and secure way, go to askthetheologian.com. There's an ask a question button up in the upper right-hand corner, and you can check that. I noticed the other day that those questions weren't updating. I talked to Nathan about that, so he's working on that to get everybody fixed up. And let's take an anonymous question today. Anonymous questions, by the way, always come through Ask the Theologian, because if you do it on Worshipify or YouTube, it's got your name on it. So there we go. Here we go. Hello. I understand about the overlap in the first century that the kingdom gospel was preached to Jews and Gentiles, Acts 17:30, while Paul also was preaching to the individual or personal gospel to everyone. That I would agree with that statement. The person goes on to say, I don't understand how he could be doing both. Let me stop right there. There's more to this that will help shed some light on the question. But I do want to stop there and give a little, what shall we call it? A little disclaimer. This overlap position, as I have there, as I have in the poster that we use often, this time of transition. What's kind of interesting to me is that there's a decent number, not all, but there's a decent number of right dividers who reject the idea of the overlap. They say, the Pauline era started in Acts chapter 9 or wherever it is they put it, and from there on, if Paul spoke, it is of the gospel of grace. And yet, still, most of those speak of the book of Acts as a transition book, the transition within the book of Acts. Transition, I guess technically it's a transition if you immediately change from black to white, but it's not really the word we would use. You go into a dark room and turn on the light. Normally you wouldn't, or you're in a dark room and you say, hey, would you hit that switch to transition to light? No. Transition is when you're in the when you go to the early dining, to get the senior discount, but you stay a little bit long and you're past the 6 or 6:30 hour, and they start to slowly dim the lights. Now it's time for the romantic dinner. The prices just went up because we are transitioning. That's a transition. So my encouragement to my fellow right dividers is, if you don't believe in an overlap, a transition slowly from one to the other, or at least perceptibly from one to the other, then don't use the word transition for the book of Acts. Say, this is the switcheroo book or something like that. This is where it goes from one to the other, because that would be true as well. Now, the other thing where I really started out here, but my ADD brain went all over the place, when you take the position of the transition, as I have done, it is not without its difficulties. And that's what this individual here is speaking about. I don't understand how he could be doing both. There are some challenges with that. But don't slip into the I guess it's a fallacy into the poor way of thinking to say the other possibility, back to back rather than transition, doesn't have its problems. It does. Sometimes we're more comfortable with the problems we've already owned or we've had all of our lives than we are with a new set of problems. I just want to say I think that a good intellectual will recognize problems here, problems there. We don't have the absolute solution. If we did have the absolute solution, nobody would be asking about it. You know, for example, I'll start the series on Cain this Sunday morning, 9:45, Tracing Cain. And everybody wants to know, who did Cain marry? I don't know how many times I've had the question, who did Cain marry? I have never had the question, who did Adam marry? Nobody ever asked me that. Why? It's just a matter of revelation, of fact. There's really no debate in it. He married Eve. And so if the issue of the switch or the transition from the kingdom gospel to the individual gospels was clear, revelation, black and white, nobody would ask any questions about it. I know he married Eve. But if it's more like, I know he got married, but there's nothing about who he married, then we ask questions. And, you know, just like the question of Cain, you have to be comfortable a little bit. A good intellectual mind will be comfortable a little bit with some of the questions and some of the, you know, as we often say here, now I see through a glass darkly. I can't quite see this one. So we deal with these, I guess we should say, responsibly. We're going to deal with the issues there. So this person comes and says, I don't understand how he could be doing both. Maybe someone else would come and say, I don't understand how he could not be doing both. I don't understand how he could only be doing one. Especially when you look at some passages of Scripture like perhaps Acts 17:30. Okay, now we go on. The questioner said we should have a name, John Doe, but that's so blasé. John Doe says, how can you tell the same group of people, Roman Jews, for example, that they're freed from the law while also telling them to keep the law for the kingdom to come? Maybe he wasn't telling them to obey the law, but he just never spoke against it. If they were obeying it, like when Paul chastised Peter in Galatians for going back to the law, could the kingdom still come? Obviously, I'm missing something. Please explain. Thank you. You're not totally missing something. You're grappling with it. You're struggling with it. Now, I think, and we had a similar question not too long ago. I think that it's all related to context. I'm going to try to come up with a real simple one. If you come here to Taos First Baptist Church, America's greatest tiny church, and you say, where are we going to meet? It's Wednesday. Where are we going to meet? Then I would say the fellowship hall. And then you show up at 10 after 6 to the fellowship hall and nobody's there. He told me we were meeting in the fellowship hall. I'm sorry. Actually, for the Bible study, we meet in the auditorium. We've had a little debate going on this week on what that room is called. I typically call it the auditorium. I don't know if I'm supposed to be more sanctified or not, but nonetheless, for Bible study, we meet in the auditorium. For supper, we meet in the fellowship hall. So I can teach both. There's actually a transition between the two about, I'd like to say about 5 till 6, they transition from one to another. But it's usually about 5 after 6 when I say, hey, get over there. There's a transition. Yeah, there's some here, there's some there. They're mingling between the two. There's this little transition that goes on. So It depends on the context. Where are we going to meet? Well, what are you talking about? So the same, are we talking about kingdom stuff? I want to talk about the law. Are we talking about individual grace gospel stuff? I don't want to talk about the law. In fact, I want to emphasize that the law is not allowed over here. And I'm probably going to have to emphasize that because I've talked about the law over here. So I'm going to have to really say, don't bring that. That doesn't belong here. Kind of like, we're not persnickety in this regard, but the old churches, said no food or drinks in the auditorium. So food or drinks belong in the fellowship hall, not in the, don't you bring that over here. And would emphasize that if that was a thing for us. So I hope that helps. Context. Try to figure out not only who is he talking to, because if it's Gentiles, he's not sharing kingdom stuff. Well, I say that. There could be, there's exceptions there too. But not only who is he talking about, but what is he talking about? And if you can determine he's talking about the kingdom, I suspect he'll have some law in there. But if he's talking about the gospel of grace, like when Peter comes to the Galatians, which didn't have a Jewish population other than the Judaizers who came from Jerusalem, and he begins to do this, seemingly promote this law stuff, that's when Paul says, no, we don't bring that over here. There's a place for that. There's a time and a place for that. It's not here. Now that makes Bible study two things. One, it makes it more challenging because you can't just, go into it and know exactly what it says. Who it's speaking to. You got to roll up your sleeves and do a little homework on it. But at the same time, not only is it more challenging, I think more challenging is more exciting, wonderful, spectacular. I was looking just yesterday, I ran across this little, I do that the first time every time, don't I? Here we go. This little Jeep tour, the River to the Sky Expedition, July 26th through July 29th. New Mexico and Colorado backroads traversal. Oh, I thought I want to do that because look at the beautiful stuff you get to go on, and driving all that's a lot better. Wouldn't you like to be right there and see the road over there? Wouldn't you like to ride that road instead of pavement? That which is more challenging is more exciting. I wanted to do it till I saw the price, and then I thought, I want to spend $1,000 to do it, but so back to it. Back to our program now. This does make the Bible study more difficult, but more difficult makes it more challenging. And you run through in a great way. I've given this illustration before, but W.A. Criswell, if that name means anything to you, he was an old-time Baptist preacher. And he was a dispensationalist, strong dispensationalist. He was almost a right divider. He was kind of a Schofield guy, almost a right divider. And he gave this illustration. He says, I hear these preachers saying, I was pacing the study floor on Saturday night saying, what am I going to preach? What am I going to preach? What am I going to preach? He says, I get up early and study all week long, and I pace the floor on Saturday night, and I say, what am I going to leave out? What am I going to leave out? What am I going to leave out? I think when we take a more in-depth, nuanced look at the Scripture, a more honest look, then it's much more difficult, but man, it'll give you a lifetime of study of looking at it, of struggle, all those kind of things. Excelente. Thank you very much. And let's move here to Valerie. I'm not sure if this is Canadian Valerie or Kentucky Valerie, but Valerie, nonetheless, glad you are here. And we've got we've got chats I was reading. We got a question from Valerie. How can Paul tell Agrippa that he, this is a related question. I'm glad I chose this right now. Gotta pull up Biblify. I didn't have it up here. We had this question or related also the other day. How can Paul tell Agrippa that he, Paul, taught none other things than the prophets and Moses when he shared the Pauline gospel with the Roman Jews? Now, it's a little, shall we say, nuance again of the question. So Paul is talking to Agrippa. Agrippa is the grandson, I believe, of King Herod. He's the king of the Jews. Having therefore obtained help of God, I continued unto this day, witnessing to both small and great, saying none other things than those things which the prophets and Moses did say should come. Now, the way we answered the question the other day is a little different than this. The other day we said what I just said. Is this the fellowship hall or the auditorium? Is this the kingdom, or is this, and he's talking in terms of the kingdom. I said none other things than those things which the prophet Moses did say should come. Now, Valerie comes and says, well, wait a minute. He was talking to Roman Jews. Now, that's an assumption. That's my assumption. I've questioned that assumption a number of times. We questioned it in our study on the Gospel of on the Epistle of Romans, and I'm convinced these were Roman Jews. But maybe could Acts 26:22 be evidence that these are not Roman Jews, that these are just Roman Gentiles, saying none other things than those things which the prophets Moses did say should come. And because in the book of Romans, he did say things that were outside. He did talk about my gospel, the revelation that was not foreseen, not known. That's absolutely in the book of Romans. So from those two things together, you could conclude, and if those are the only two things you had, you could honestly conclude that the Romans were not Jews. However, there's some things in the book of Romans, like, I don't know, is Romans 3, sort of. Well, let's go with Romans 4. There's even more obvious ones. But Romans 4, I brought it up on the right side of the screen. What shall we say then that Abraham, our father, as pertaining to the flesh? You have to say, no way around this one, you have to say Adam married Eve. You have to say that at least part of Romans is written to Jews. And then I think it becomes impossible to say, well, he actually sent it in several different envelopes. And he said, this is the Jewish envelope and this is the Gentile envelope. Do not, if you are Jew, do not read that Gentile stuff. I think that would be very, very challenging to say. So, I think I want to give an illustration, a premise and an illustration. And I think this is going to be fair. The premise is when Paul says, saying none other things than those things which Moses did say, he still has in this the context, though somewhat unstated, the context of the kingdom. I think anybody who knows how to deal with cross-examination would know, and certainly Paul knew this, he's very well educated, and he stood before lots of kings, councils, authorities, would know you answer the question the way they worded it, not the way they should have worded it. I think of an illustration, I'm not sure I can remember the details well enough. John D. Rockefeller. Remember him? I always say that, I listened to an audiobook recently on John D. Rockefeller, a biography of John D. Rockefeller. A lot of things I didn't know about John D. Rockefeller. You know, he either comes across as a sinner or a saint, depending on who you talk to. And I think if you know John D. Rockefeller, you know that he was a little bit of both. I think we normally call that human. He had some very saintly things about him. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't chew, didn't go with girls who do. He was a strong, strong, strong Baptist all of his life. Really, I would say a fundamentalist Baptist all of his life. He supported a lot of local church Baptist causes. A great deal of his benevolence was towards Christian work. And yet he also was, I don't know, would you use the word unscrupulous when it came to business practices? Depending on how you want to define it all. He was asked one time about, remember the whole trust busting thing of breaking up Standard Oil? It had to do somewhat, partly with the fact that Standard Oil would work with the railroad companies and say, give us preferential treatment in rail rates because we put more stuff on there. They actually made laws to make this illegal, even though Amazon gets preferential rates with the governmental U.S. Postal Service, because they mail more stuff. It's still fairly common today, even though in one sense it's illegal. Well, Rockefeller was smart enough to know. This is why it takes a long time to answer a question. We talk about Rockefeller instead of Agrippa. But Rockefeller was smart enough to know, we better not write this down. So his business practice in what was the largest corporation perhaps in the world at that time, his business practice was basically, we don't do contracts. You and I meet, we shake hands, we know what we're going to do. So the lawyer asked him a question about, are the contracts still in effect? We have no contracts. We've never had those kind of contracts. That's what he said. And you know, he wasn't lying. He was answering the question the way the prosecutor gave him the question, the cross-examiner gave him the question. Now, is that, I don't know, is that unethical? Because we have to ask that question, because I'm placing this on Paul here to say, I think if you were to check this, Paul, in the context, we can't take this highlighted bit just to be a blanket statement, all-encompassing of his communication. Even with Jews, you could take, if you don't want to take the book of Romans, take the book of the two letters to the Thessalonians. Clearly the Thessalonians are Jews, and yet he's writing to them about the rapture. So I think we have to take Acts chapter 26 and say, depending on how you want to spin it, I'll go ahead and look at it both ways. Have to say, Paul, that was sort of a half-truth. But actually it was a full truth according to the question given to you. And we do believe in the Fifth Amendment, even though that wasn't around in Paul's day. You don't have to implicate yourself. Wise as serpents, gentle as doves. That's where Paul was in Acts 26, standing before Agrippa. To the Thessalonians, to the Corinthians, to the Romans, I think. He's careful to talk about both things to make the separation, but he also doesn't hide the fact that there is something that is not in the prophets and in Moses. There's this interesting thing too. We have created this idea of Jew, or we even created the word Jew. In Paul's day, arguably, there wasn't such a thing as Jew as Paul the Jew. There was Judeans. So could it even be argued that Paul never told the Judeans anything other than the things that the prophets Moses should say should come? Now to the Romans, yeah, but you didn't ask about the Romans. You asked about the Judeans, Agrippa. You're the king of Judea. Judea, yeah, it's Judea in the New Testament, Judah in the Old Testament. So this, I don't know, that kind of stuff fascinates me to say, let's really dig into the intricacies of this conversation and put all that together to come to a full understanding even of Paul, what's going on there. Thanks, Valerie. That was interesting. A comment from Deb in Arkansas. The solar eclipse on April 8th is becoming a major event. The National Guard is being deployed and people are being advised to have 2 weeks of food and to fill their fuel tanks. At the same time, the Devil Comet, that's not its official name. The Devil Comet is aligning with the April 8th eclipse, and due to the fact that in 1811 a comet also appeared in the skies during a solar eclipse, and the same path was followed by the biggest earthquakes in American history. During the eclipse on April 8th, NASA will fire 3 rockets. The CERN, C-E-R-N, which stands for something, will be firing up their large Hadron, I think is how you pronounce it, H-A-D-R-O-N, collider to full power during the solar eclipse, and Israel is planning to sacrifice a red heifer. Good grief, what could possibly go wrong? We talked about this some yesterday. Here's an article, SecureTheRepublic.com has an article called CERN Preparedness, the April 8th solar eclipse, something like that. SecureTheRepublic.com, might want to check that out, it's interesting. Could it be a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy? I basically yesterday said the fact that you got the eclipse of 2017 and the eclipse of 2024 are going to make an X, that's just pure geometry. The 6th graders today at John Nelson Darby Academy have a lesson on Johann Kepler, who was noted the art, he called it, of the way all the planets move, and said God speaks to us in geometry. It's a geometric thing. And it's really the same with the comet. Comets are really bound to their, circuitry. So much that we know when it's going to come. It's not a surprise. So then some, like the article we look at yesterday, said, we got an X marks the spot, and we have a comet just like we did in 1811. There's going to be earthquakes just like there was post 1811. Maybe we add enough to it that eventually you do tip the thing where, it actually happens. You've got huge crowds of people. I understand that. I mean, as you know, if I was close, I'd probably, well, let's drive over a few miles where we can see it over there. My kids went, Nathan and Whitney went, they were newlyweds in 2017, and they decided to go up to Wyoming and see it in 2017. It's like, hey, we don't have kids, we got a car, we got gas, let's go do it. And when you go to Wyoming, it's a lot different than going to Arkansas, because about half the world lives in a 200-mile radius of Arkansas, but in Wyoming, nobody lives there. So you can go up and find a nice, but they did it in 2017. Y'all missed your opportunity. Should have done it then. So yeah, okay, that's kind of cool, kind of interesting. Go see it. But you put the crowds together that you get, over there, not in the American West, American Northwest, if whatever you call Wyoming, Northwest, Midwest, I don't know. Put all those people together, what could go wrong? You certainly can have fuel shortages. I mean, there's only so much those gas station tanks can hold. You could have grocery store shortages. There's only so much traffic that those grocery stores can handle. And we've talked before how we got a really small margin on groceries and gas. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't, find, there's fuel shortages, there's gas shortage. I knew it because of the devil comet. It's because of trucking issues and supply chain issues more. But then you add all this other stuff that's going on. It could happen then. Will it? Let's suppose that World War III breaks out April the 9th. I will venture to say that has absolutely nothing to do with the eclipse. But forevermore, some prophecy teachers will say, look right here, there it is. It's the eclipse and the devil comet caused World War III. No, it's people that will cause World War III. And people are unpredictable. Thank you. Here's a worldview question. Would you express your concerns, anonymous? The question's anonymous, I'm not. Would you express your concerns over IVF procedures in vitro fertilization, which many people have benefited from by being able to start their family otherwise, not being able to start their family otherwise. However, after the birth, they are being faced with new challenges, such as what do you do with the remaining viable embryos that have been frozen? I know someone who would like to continue using those to complete their family. The cost to continue freezing them monthly is great, and they would have to do that for at least 3 more years. They do not want to let them go to other families. If they don't use them or pay to have them frozen continually, would you call that murder? I think we have to be consistent here. And consistency does say that when egg and sperm come together, you then have conception. I suppose there's times when it doesn't work, but nonetheless, let's just pretend like it does work every time. Sperm comes together with egg, you have conception. Normally, and I think rightly so, those of us who are Christians would say, once there's conception, that is a human life. Now, obviously, there have been debates on that, and people try to push that off. Even in a conservative sense, I think Florida, or what was it? One of the states just recently got the thumbs up from the Supreme Court to say, yeah, your law is good. And they put it at like 10 weeks or something like that. I would go sooner than 10 weeks, but because I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think if you do IVF, you don't have to wait 10 weeks to know that that thing worked. I may be wrong there. So anyway, to be consistent, the destruction of let's call it a preborn human, is the destruction of a human. And we would call that murder. The world got us to call it abortion. It shouldn't have. We shouldn't have bought that line there, but we did. The cat's out of the bag on that one. Aborting a human life is murder. That would be the conservative Christian position, I think biblical position. Now, when we consider those who get an abortion, we often think of, unwed mothers or someone struggling through whatever difficulty, and it was an unplanned pregnancy. And, we say, they shouldn't do that. There's options. There's people who can handle this. But then there's the whole other thing of, hey, this is a fine Christian young couple who's struggling to have children. They want to have their own biological children, and they decide we're going to do in vitro fertilization. I have no idea. I suspect in vitro fertilization itself has quite a bit of a financial cost to it. So is it a right thing? I don't know. I don't know that this is the case because there may be insurance or something like this, but is it can we say, this is probably wrong on some degree, and I'll put that out there first, but can we say in vitro fertilization, let's just say it blunt, it's a rich white person problem? And then can we say, statistics would allow it, abortion is a poor black person problem, but IVF is a rich white person problem? We will allow the murder of the rich white people if it's not convenient for them, but we will not allow the murder of the poor black child if it's not convenient for them. Obviously, there's a huge inconsistency there. You and I, we talk about the inconsistency sometimes of abortionists as it relates to valuing life. Why don't you value? Why do you value the criminal's life and don't allow capital punishment, but you don't value the unborn life? So we look at those inconsistencies and say, that's inconsistent. Get your thinking. At least be consistent, if nothing else. So on this, I think we have to be consistent. Now you come into, again, I'm sorry, I'm probably being way too blunt here, but you come into this rich white person problem. Hey, we can do this to have some babies. Let's do it. And maybe they don't think it all the way through, or sometimes when you really want something, the desire causes you not to see all those things. That's true in almost any area of life. You want it so bad that you don't see the downside. And they want children so bad, and I think it's understandable. They want children so bad that they don't see, hey, we're going to end up with, I don't know how conservative IVF has become. Can you limit it to 1? Can you limit it to 2? My guess is you can, but the cost is tremendous because there's probably let's call it the cost of overhead that says, look, to take 1 egg, put it in the test tube, the chances are, we're going to make up numbers, the chances are 2%. And it's going to cost $10,000. But while we're at it, we can put 20 eggs in there. And the cost is still $10,000. But now you've gone from 2% to, let's say, 80%. Again, I'm making up numbers. And you want the baby so bad that maybe they think, oh, yeah. And then later it's like, oh, okay, what do we do with these? Now, even the medical world understands this is life. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the frozen possibility. And even the medical world understands, hey, rich people, they will pay to keep these frozen for a while. The medical world, I don't know what the 3-year waiting period is, if that's something literally medically required. I mean, in the truest sense of the word required, or is this the freezer company says, a 3-year waiting period, it's got to be a 3-year waiting period, yes, it would be dangerous. 3-year waiting period, cha-ching. I don't know. Not my area of expertise. I'm speaking in ethics. I think this family is wise in that they say, we want these children to be born. We want them to be born into our family. We're their parents. Just like we wouldn't give our born children up for adoption, we don't want to give our unborn. So they want to do this. So I think their choice, honestly, their ethical choice, to be consistent, is to have the babies in their family, which is going to involve some money paying, some money to do it, some money raising them. You think it's expensive to keep them frozen. Wait till you start raising them. It's one of these areas I think Christians probably ought to talk about more. This is one of those areas that we have created the problem. Because we created the problem, we can't put it off, say, we set aside our ethics because this is not like a biblically, God didn't create this problem, we created the problem, and therefore we don't have ethics on it. We created the problem, we got ourselves into the problem, we got to find ways to deal with this and to do it. So then you do a little bit come to the point of, is IVF itself inherently unethical? I think probably we wouldn't say inherently unethical. I think we would say it inherently brings ethical issues. And I think we would say to overcome those unethical issues is for most people far too expensive. If you're not John D. Rockefeller, you cannot afford to come up with these. Again, I don't know how this is. Probably the answer may not be get rid of in vitro fertilization. The answer may be for Christian doctors, research organizations, universities to say, how can we make it ethically in alignment with principles of human life to the point that someone can afford it? How can we do one baby at a time? Because I suspect, just like, I don't know, electronics cost a lot when they first come out and then the price drops dramatically. I suspect there are ways to bring that cost down, especially if we get it out of the medical industrial complex into the hands of normal humans. You got to do some research, you got to do some study, you got to know what's going on here biologically. But to a degree, this is not rocket science. Or shall we say, the rocket scientists have already done their work and it's in the public domain now, so we can take that knowledge base and use it and make it cheap. I don't know why. I'm going to chase a medical rabbit here for a moment. I don't know why groups of believers don't do more of this. We used to. That's why you go to wherever it is you go, whatever town, especially, well, I don't know, wherever it is you go, anywhere in the United States anyway, there is a hospital with a religious name on it. Here in Taos, it's the Holy Cross Medical Center, Catholic. A lot of places you go, there's St. Christus, Catholic. Or that's a chain of Catholic hospitals. You get Baptist hospitals all over the place, especially through the South. Up in the Northeast, perhaps, you get Baptist hospitals, you get Presbyterian. The biggest hospital in Albuquerque is the Presbyterian Hospital. You get Lutheran hospitals. You got Dallas, got the big Methodist hospital, and Baylor Medical Center, which is a big Baptist hospital. We used to say, hey, it's an ethical thing to take care of humans. Let's do this in a way that can happen. You know, the only people I know that do this today, here's a little trigger warning. The only people I know that do this today are the Shriners. And it doesn't cost anything to go to the Shriners Hospital. Maybe St. Jude, I don't know. Does St. Jude charge? Why don't Christians come together and say, hey, there's an issue with Christians having babies, some of them aren't unable to, and why can't we develop the technology and the medical know-how where you can go down here to the local nonprofit clinic and make this happen with one baby, and it costs you a donation. I bet we could do it, but we don't. I want to give you a different historical example. I don't even know that I mentioned it on this program, but on my trip, I listened to a book on Herbert Hoover. I may be the only one in the audience. I may be the Herbert Hoover expert in the room today. I thought, I don't know anything about Herbert Hoover. I'd like to know about Herbert Hoover. The only thing I could remember about Herbert Hoover is that my history teacher in high school, Mr. Lauber, told me Herbert Hoover was a terrible president. He caused the Great Depression, and then he had the unfortunate experience of being the longest living president there ever was, and he had to live with his mistakes for the rest of his life. If you'd asked me before I read about Herbert Hoover, I would have said, yeah, he caused the Depression, and then he had to live with it forever because he lived till he was like 96. I think Jimmy Carter now is the longest living. But until then, he was. Well, Herbert Hoover's an interesting fellow, but here's what I didn't know about Herbert Hoover, and maybe you don't as well. World War I, like all wars, caused a tremendous degree of famine. And do we have Rudy here? Rudy in Belgium? He probably knows about Herbert Hoover if he's here. I didn't know this. Because of the geopolitics of World War I, the people in Belgium were starving. And Herbert Hoover created single-handedly, he was an engineer. I think he's the only president that was an engineer. And he got rich from mining in Australia. Herbert Hoover he created the Belgium Relief Fund. Something like that. I think that's what it's called. As a private citizen, and literally fed probably 100,000 people or more. All private money gathered together feeding Belgium for a number of years, kept them from starvation. He was a humanitarian. Here's my point. Why isn't there someone out there who doesn't say, hey, we got a huge IVF problem. We want to solve the problem. Let's have the Committee for Ethical IVF. We could solve these problems if we came together and did it. But our problem now is we so much think. Nobody would think about, oh, we need a committee to feed Belgium. I think I'll do that. We would say, how come Joe Biden doesn't do anything to feed the people of Belgium? We'd blame it on somebody. Instead of doing something about it. We ought to become right dividers, if anything, ought to become let's do something about it kind of people. can't be that hard. I think it helps if you made a lot of money in mining, but Cash, good to see you this morning. Switching gears here, Cash in Washington State. Do I have that right? Ellensburg. It's coming to me, Cash. St. Jude's is free, thank you. Mid-Acts needs a hospital that specializes in birthing, rightly dividing the word and the mom from the baby. Yeah, a little pro-life hospital. I see he's asking about my pen as well. Roger out in California gave me this pen, and then Rich in Pensacola suggested I get some of these. Can I see what kind of pen this is? Scrivener. Scrivener. It's a Scrivener pen. It's a pretty pen. I keep it here on my desk. Actually, I need to order some more ink because it ran out of ink, so right now it's just for show. Shouldn't tell everything. I'm coming to you, Cash. Percy's, my grandson and his wife had their babies at home in a huge bathtub. That's because I don't know if it's popular everywhere. It's certainly popular here in Taos. A lot of people have their babies at home now, partly because of cost and then a number of other reasons. You know, they have midwives that come in and set up a bathtub in the living room. Do you want to know that at least 3 babies have been born in the parsonage? Right there in the living room, Rich. They weren't our family, but within recent years. Cash has a question about Deuteronomy 32:8. You know, I want to look up a little of the history of the name Cash. I know a teenager named Cash, and I know a lot of, shall I say this because I don't know Cash, what his age is, but I know old men named Cash. Maybe it's coming back, I don't know. But I'm wondering, does that come from the same etymology as cash? Or is it something else? To the question. Deuteronomy 32:8, were the nations divided according to the number of the children of Israel or the sons of God? When the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. Now, I suspect this word bounds, we're going to check this out, is the word boundaries. Trigger warning to the leftists here. The Bible does speak about borders, boundaries. This is where you go. Maybe you could argue that this is talking about the time period in which the Mesopotamians are going to live, followed by the Medo-Persians, whatever. I think it's talking about this is their territory. We'll confirm that. So the Most High God divided the nations their inheritance. That sounds like a land thing to me. When the Most High. Now here's the question. Is this second phrase right here, I'm going to go ahead and put this in green. This second phrase, is it parallelism to the first? So that when the Most High divided the nations, to the nations their inheritance, is the same thing as when he separated the sons of Adam? Or do we have two different things? He divided their inheritance, then he separated. It may be a distinction without a difference. It may be that he determined it in his mind, what their inheritance is going to be, and then through the process of the ages, he divided them, like through Babylon and whatnot. He got them to their inheritance. Whether he did that in two phases or one phase, it might not matter. He set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. Well, even this, he set the bounds of the people. Let me go ahead and change that to, I got it green. Maybe these three green statements here, are they all the same? Divided the nations, separated the sons, set the bounds of the people. If you take those as three of the same thing, then all three of those are done according to the number of the children of Israel. But if you take this second phrase here, let's put that in blue. Separated the sons of Adam. If you take this as one, two, or three different things, then you might have the sons of Adam, which is the sons of mankind, perhaps. I agree with the capital A there. But it could possibly just be the sons of man, the sons of Adam. And then the people could be Israel. So I think your possibilities here are he separated each nation according to the number of people they have, even the people Israel according to the number of the children of Israel. The people of Egypt got according to the number of the children of Egypt. The people of Syria got according to the number of Syria. Or according to the number of the children of Israel, he gave all of the nations, just based upon that number, their particular inheritance. Maybe in that case, you might say the people of Israel became the scale. And then, therefore, let's speak in, modern day Israel versus China. Say, okay, Israel's got 10 million people, and they have this much land. China has 1 billion people, and so they're going to get this much land. I'm not giving China per capita more than I gave to Israel, is a possible way of looking at that. Now, what's the right way of looking at it? Probably the first thing for us to do is go to our friend Rashi. He's the Jewish commentator of the Middle Ages. We're going to go the book of Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter. And then we're going to show Rashi. And then we're going to go down to verse 8. Let's look, first of all, at their English translation. When the Most High gave nations their lot, when he separated the sons of man, notice they don't say the sons of Adam, but the sons of man, he set up the boundaries according to the number of the children of Israel. Now, this almost looks like two things. Part one, he gave the nations their lot, he separated the sons of man. And then when he did that, he set up the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. That seems to be their interpretation in their English translation, rather than is all this one. It's one of these things you notice commas matter. Okay, when he gave the nations their lot, Rashi says, when the Holy One, blessed is he, gave those who provoked him to anger their portion, he flooded them and drowned them, i.e., that was their lot. That's an interpretation. The text doesn't say it. But it's probably a fairly common rabbinical interpretation to make This phrase right here, when he gave the nations their lot, means the same thing as back in Noah's flood, because that was their lot. Okay, when he separated the sons of man, Rashi says, when God scattered the generation of the dispersion which built the Tower of Babel, he had the power to remove them from the world altogether, but he did not do so. Rather, he set up the boundaries of the people. That is, he let them remain in existence, but did not destroy them. So this is this is helpful here. Let's go back to Biblify. And he says, I'm gonna recolor here. I'm gonna make this one red. This is number one. When the Most High divided the nations their inheritance is number one. When he separated the sons of Adam is number two. And when he set the bounds of the people is number three. There we go. Three things. Now let's interpret that according to how Rashi has it. He divided the nations their inheritance. He gave them their lot at the flood. Then we know in that little blank space right there that the world began to be repopulated, and after a time they all gathered to Babel and they tried to build this place, and he separated the sons of Adam. So when the flood came, when Babel came, then that is the same time that he gave to the children of Israel their inheritance. Let's go back, see if we're getting this right. Okay, number one, number two. According to the number of the children of Israel, God let man remain in existence for the sake of a small number of the children of Israel who were destined to descend from the children of Shem, and the sake of the number of the 70 souls of the children of Israel who went down to Egypt. He set the boundaries of the people. That is, he separated man unto 70 nations with 70 languages. Again, a little rabbinical interpretation there, which sounds, when you first read rabbinical interpretation, it sounds fanciful. How do you know it's 70 languages and 70 nations? They've got something back there where they came up with that. Whether we agree with that assumption or not, they've got an argument for it anyway. So it's an interesting interpretation, saying at the flood, God gave the nations what they deserved. But at Babel, he let them live because in Babel, the children of Shem were there. And he wanted to do something through the children of Shem. And therefore, he said, Egypt, you go over here. Assyria, you go up here. Mesopotamians, you go over there. Israel, I'm keeping you. It's an interesting idea. Wouldn't you agree, Cash? Were the nations divided according to the number of the children of Israel or according to the sons of God? I think I'm coming down to say maybe we're reading too much into the word numbers here to make it a mathematical thing. And maybe it's just there's a number of Israel, there's a number of Jews, future Jews, it wouldn't have been called Jews, but let's go ahead and call them. There's a number of Jews out there in the future that I want to take care of. Using the term number there not in its scientific or mathematical sense, in which case it's not either, to get to the question, the number of the children of Israel or the number of the sons of God, but rather this progression. Now, I don't know. That's one that would take a little bit more to look at. By the way, I love the next verse. The Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. Right there says Israel is God's inheritance, is what he gets out of the deal. Cash, I hope that was helpful. I don't know that we completely answered your question, but I hope it was helpful there. Let's see, we got Sherry and Lafayette. Get to your question there tomorrow. Pastor Timothy has a note about what we were talking about earlier in Agrippa. Thank you. And we've got a remark from Gerard. I already answered the question about the pin, so I'll go ahead and delete that. And Manny, I got a question of Manny. I need to get that there. I've left Manny hanging there. Sorry about that. Thank each one of you for being here. Check and make sure I didn't leave anything. But it's time to go. Whether I left it or not, it's time to go. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for those of you who push the thumbs up button. That's free. Or who push the donate button every now and then at randywhiteministries.org, or who join us online and tell your friends, hey, come on, come see us. Comments help, thumbs up help, subscribes help, sharing helps, everything helps. A good smile will help you. Thanks for being here today. Tonight, the Gospel of Mark, a few minutes after 6 o'clock. Thanks for joining us here. I certainly appreciate it and look forward to seeing you the rest of the week on Ask the Theologian tonight in Bible study. God bless.